If you're in the process of choosing your next grouse dog and a pointing dog's on your list, this video is for you because I'm going to be covering 3 fundamental characteristics of different pointing breeds and how those actually play out in the grouse woods. So I'm Kyle Blood, Wild North Kennel. We're located in northern Minnesota. We're blessed to be located in prime grouse country where we get to spend 100 to 150 days a year in the grouse woods, whether that be hunting or training. And we do that behind everything from French Brittany's, wire hair Griffons, German short hairs, pointers, setters, you name it. And we've kind of gotten to see the gamut of how some different characteristics of dogs, both breed and individuals, play out. So really the intent here is to give you the information that you need to go through and have really good conversations with breeders as you go through the process of selecting what breed is right for you. So the first concept I really want to talk about here, and it's probably the big one that's on everyone's mind when they're thinking about pointing dogs and grouse hunting, and that's really range. And so range is defined by how far your dog is hunting away from you, essentially, right? So you can have long range dogs, you can have a little bit shorter. And I really just want to walk through some pros and cons with each of these types of dogs. So when we think about a long-range dog in the grouse woods, this is a dog that probably at its closest is 60, 70 yards, and at its furthest might be out in the 150, 200 plus yards. There's a lot of advantages to having a dog like this in the grouse woods, and as you start getting into like cover dog trials and stuff, that's what most of these dogs would be categorized as. Probably the biggest benefit that we've seen these little bigger ranging dogs is their tendency to bring you to birds. So lots of times what we see with these dogs is we'll get into a piece of cover and maybe the birds are loafing, or maybe we don't really know the cover all that well. Well, these dogs will reach into that cover and they'll actually find where the birds are living and they'll kind of bring you to them. So there's been countless times where we go into the woods, we don't really know what the birds are doing that day, or we don't know the piece that well, and one of our bigger ranging dogs will go on point 30 minutes in, and the piece of cover that they bring us to is where all the birds are. And so from there on out, we have a really, really productive hunt because they located those birds for us and kind of brought us to them. On the flip side, though, one of the things with that longer ranging dog, especially when you're talking about ruffed grouse, is those birds have a tendency to run. So lower shots per point. So these dogs have a tendency to point these birds, and they're 150, 200 yards out, which takes in the grouse woods a long time to get to, and grouse just don't hang around for that long. So if you get a point at 150 yards, the odds of that bird being there when you actually get there go down every single second that passes. So while they're going out, they're finding birds, they're finding new cover, they're doing all this, that doesn't necessarily mean the bird's going to be there when you get there. The other part that we think through is you just don't see these dogs very often. So seeing your dog. In the grouse woods, we can really only see 30, 40 yards at best. And that dog's at 70, 80, maybe 100. So we just don't see the dog very often. So if you're someone that really likes to see the dog work, maybe see the dog actually go on point, how it works the cover, you might want to consider that when you're looking at some of those longer ranging breeders, because range really is less to do with breed and more to do with breeder. Obviously there are probably more pointers in the world that are going to run 150 yards than there are, say, Spinonis, but there are breeders probably doing both. There are definitely breeders that are breeding pointers that are closer, and there are breeders that are breeding other breeds to run out a lot further. So definitely breeder specific as we're talking about range. So the shorter ranging breeds, one of the pros is really one of the cons of the long ranging breed, which is just your shot to point ratio, is a lot better. So when these dogs go on point, typically you'll see them actually go on point. You know, they're in that 20 to 50 yards. So you'll see them go on point. They have to be on point for a lot less time because you're close to them, which means you're getting more shots per point, right? So you're just a lot closer. Grouse just don't hang around, so you get better shot opportunities on actual points, at least percentage wise. So another pro of these dogs is, once again, the con of the big ranging dog is you get to see them work. And there is something really, really special about seeing a grouse dog work the woods. So they're a blast to have around, to see the dogs actually work the cover, see them start to get birdie, see them lock up. It pretty much stops your heart every time, no matter how many times you see it. So definitely a pro when we're talking about these little shorter ranging dogs. The big con is probably the big pro for the long range dogs, which is just if you want to hunt a piece of cover with your dog, you actually have to physically walk there. So just expand. Just the expansion of how far they're going. They don't tend to do as well if the birds aren't moving around a lot. So if they're loafing or near like a low concentration area, you're going to have to put on a lot of miles. It's totally doable. You're just going to have to put on more miles and cover that piece of land more extensively on your end to get to the point where you actually find the birds. So range it's not a binary in any way, shape, or form. There's pros and cons to having a dog that runs 200 yards, and there's pros and cons to having a dog that runs 20 yards. It really comes down to preference at this point. The most important thing to remember with range is that this is really breeder specific. So you're going to want to talk to your breeder about how far their dogs range, because we've seen, wire hair Griffons that'll range 200 yards. We've seen wire hair Griffons that, are 30 feet away. And so it's really specific to the breeder. Just make sure you're asking that question. So the next two are really more about, one's about breeder, but one's about just the physical characteristics of the dogs. So I want to talk a little bit about the actual coats of the dogs. So the different kinds of coats that exist. So you kind of have longer hair, you have shorter hair, and then you have this category of dogs where they're kind of wire hair dogs. So longer hair, that's going to be like your setters, your Brittany's, things like that, where they have a little bit longer coat, but it's a lot more wispy than like the wire hairs. And then your short hairs, obviously, your German short hairs, your pointers, things like that, where they have just really short coats. So longer hair and wire hair dogs, both of their coats tend to help them get beat up a little bit less in the woods. So they got a little bit more protection, less cuts, less rashes, less irritation, things like that. I mean, the grouse woods can be pretty unforgiving. I don't really care what part of the country you're in. You're probably in pretty nasty cover with thistles and thorns and briars and thorn apples, all the stuff that really tears up a dog's skin. These longer haired dogs are a little bit better protected than that from some of these shorter haired dogs. Now the other side of that is these longer haired dogs definitely pick up a lot more. So you're more likely to have thistles and briars stuck in their fur that you're going to have to comb out. And they also require a lot more maintenance in the off season. So you're going to have to do some more grooming and stuff like that with these dogs. Now the shorter haired dogs, they're really, really low maintenance from the fact of there's no grooming required. Nothing sticks to their fur, but they get beat up a little bit more. You're going to get a lot more cuts, things like that. They also tend to do really, really well in heat, just obviously because they got a lot less fur, which can be really preferable, especially in the early season. We really don't talk about them not doing well in cold. From an upland hunting standpoint, I haven't found a temperature that's a problem for us yet, I'll take out my pointer in, -20, and I've seen no issues. We don't actually run birds at that temperature because we really want to protect the birds, and that's not good for them to push them around at that temperature. But going out plowing snow, running the fields, skiing, whatever, we'll take out our short hairs and pointers in that weather all day, and as long as they're moving, they're totally fine. One other characteristic that's probably worth mentioning about the wire hairs specifically is they tend to have a lot more oily, coarse coat than like a setter or something like that. And these really is where your dual purpose dogs come in. I know there's lots of short hairs and stuff that are dual purpose, Vizslas, all that. But these dogs tend to do really, really well in wet, cold environments because of the way their coat. So wire hair Griffons, Spinonis, Griffs, Draughts, they all have really coarse, wiry coats that allow them to handle some cold weather situations, or probably, I would say, wet and cold situations better than some of these other ones. So the last thing that's worth considering is really the demeanor of your dog. And what I mean by that is specifically how they orient themselves within the family. And so you can have dogs that are really family oriented. Lots of the German breeds we found, and this has just been our experience, have been really family oriented, where they really like being around you, they like being around other people. They're just really social dogs, and they get a lot from that relationship. The opposite, obviously, is a dog that's very aloof, meaning they could take or leave your presence. They'd be just as happy in a kennel 20 hours a day and getting to run 4 hours and not having any attention or contact with people. This, I'm sure, is very breeder specific, but what we have found in our experience has been, the versatile breeds, things like that, have been much more family oriented than some of the more traditional bird dogs. So like pointers, setters. Actually, setters, I should take that back. Setters have been very family oriented, at least the ones that we've been around. But pointers, very specifically, are a little bit more aloof. Not that they don't like people. I think that's something that is kind of a common misconception. It's not that they don't like people. It just seems like they have way more important things to do than get pet or want attention. They're just really busy, and they're cruising around doing things, and makes them come off as a lot more aloof. But they definitely don't orient themselves in the family the same way as some of these other dogs, at least in our experience. I'm sure there are ones out there that are, like a Labrador, but we haven't come across as many of those. So those are kind of the 3 things to think through as you're going over for your next pointing dog, especially with grouse hunting. Once again, this isn't a video about a specific breed, more about characteristics. So make sure you're talking to your breeder about these things and what they're breeding for, because there's huge variations within the different breeds. If you like this video, we did another one on the flushing dog side of things. So if you're interested in that one, you can go ahead and check it out. Otherwise, appreciate you watching.